Hello and welcome to episode 172 of the Colby Cast, your place for community and conversation about pop culture and storytelling. On this episode, Caleb is still in Paris, or at least in Europe, so Luke is back to help me talk about House of the Dragon, episodes 7 and 8 of season 2, otherwise known as the season finale and the penultimate episode of season 2. So, without further ado, I thought of changing your name, Luke. I think I would like to refer to you as Luke the Realm's Delight. How do you like that idea?
That reminds me of those Turkish delights from the Chronicles of Narnia. Those looked delicious.
I'm skipping way ahead of our conversation, but as soon as Aegon said that in episode 8, I thought of the same thing. I thought of the Turkish delights. Good call. See, we're on the same wavelength. How you been? How's everything going?
Things are good. I have been in San Diego for the past week, and I feel nice and tan. I don't look tan, but I feel tan.
Oh, I would disagree. For our listeners out there, I would say you've got some sun. You're looking pretty tan, like a SoCal boy. So, yeah, time was spent in San Diego, and San Diego is a lovely town. So, did you do anything special down there while you chose to go after Comic Con? So, did you do anything fun while you were there?
I did. I went to the beach, a bunch of different beaches, a couple times. Ate some great food. Underbelly, best food I've ever had. Ramen, delicious, 10 out of 10. Then had some burgers, cooked a little bit. Um, Went to a Padres Dodger game down there where the Padres choked a 5-0 lead to the Padres because, that's what they do. Um,
I
yeah, and
think you
then,
meant to say that the Dodgers choked a 5-0 lead to the Padres.
yeah, that one. Um,
Maybe we
I,
should have saved this talk for when Caleb came back so that you guys could talk specifically about that game.
I'm happy to revisit it.
What else were you going to say?
Yeah, then we as a family got a house over the weekend in the middle of nowhere in the mountains, and we got to hang out there for a while, look at some bunnies, and play some pickleball, which I'm extremely good at, by the way.
I'm glad you brought up the pickleball because I was going to bring it up. First time I had ever played pickleball. And yes, we did grab a nice Airbnb in the city of Escondido, California, and took a little family getaway up there. And it had 3 pickleball courts. So a lot of fun was had. I agree with you. You might be a prodigy. Like the first time you've ever picked up a pickleball racket and you were winning games on something that you created that was like some kind of under the leg serve, which I had no idea how to defend because it would come off the paddle like a rocket and it would be so close to the net that I was convinced it was going to hit the net every time and drop, but somehow it made it over and then dropped, and then next thing I know you were winning points. But all a fun time was had by all, and I would play pickleball again. I was not aware of this phenomenon, but I guess it's pretty big now. And count me in as a fan. I'd like to see it become an Olympic sport.
If it does, you might see me competing. I don't know. I've only played a handful of times, but I really do think I'm next up.
You're a gold medalist in the waiting, no doubt about it. Yeah, so San Diego, great town, love it. I still love LA. I'm an LA boy, but San Diego is very nice to visit, and we did visit recently. So shout out to San Diego. Hey, we've talked about going to San Diego on the podcast before and how it was like the best eating trip we ever had, but that was a couple of years ago, huh? You mentioned Underbelly. That's your favorite place on earth, ramen and stuff. So shout out to the Underbelly fans in San Diego. Um, I wanted to do a real quick Deadpool and Wolverine update before we get to our House of the Dragon, just because the thing is, I was really interested to see how the second weekend went about, because if there's a huge drop off, then it was sort of just like a one weekend wonder and it's not going to have legs. But if the second weekend performs well, then we have potentially a pretty special event going on. And guess what, Luke? Have you seen the box office numbers for the last weekend?
I have no idea how it did, but I know I contributed to it.
Oh, that's right. You went in and saw it again. So you saw it for a second time. Any new thoughts or any revelations, or did it change your opinion from the first time?
No, I think it just strengthened my opinions more than anything. I realized that I should never second guess myself because my first guess is always right. Um, it was exactly how I enjoyed it the first time, where I thought it was really funny, it was really heartwarming, couple glaring plot points that I think were a little missing, but it didn't change anything for me the first time or the second time.
I want to take a quick moment to shout out the Long Take Review with Jen Subtalk Chai Bankard and PT McNiff. They were nice enough to invite me onto that podcast to have a discussion about Deadpool and Wolverine. So after talking to you about it, Luke, for about an hour and 20 minutes for our episode, I went on the Long Take Review, which is a terrific podcast, and they cover Academy Award stuff, and movies, all kinds of movies. Just, they run the gamut on talking about movies, and I was very lucky to sort of be the Marvel guy that they invited to talk about this movie. I was very excited about it, and we went 2.5 hours. We talked about Deadpool Wolverine for 2.5 hours. So between the Colby cast and the Long Take Review, I got to talk about this thing for close to 4 hours, and I still feel like I could talk more about it. But I'm going to limit my comments to just like the box office. But I'm glad to hear that you enjoyed it the second time, and also thanks again to Jen and PT and all those at the Long Take Review. Go check out the podcast. Wonderful, great discussion. They have great dynamic. They have great chemistry. They're all friends and they're all coworkers in one sense or another, and they just have a fun time and get really into really interesting details of different films. So go check it out again, and thanks again. So box office numbers. Um, so it looks like this past weekend it made about $97 million in the U.S. and you can add $110 million internationally. So any movie in the world would love those numbers for their opening weekend, and that was its second weekend. So far, it's made $395 million in the US. It's made 429 million internationally for a total of 824 million worldwide. So probably going to break a billion, I would guess. I don't really know how the box office numbers work that closely. I don't follow it that closely, but it's probably going to break a billion probably by this weekend. And it sort of makes my hot take of hoping that it was going to make $1 billion sort of weak, because now it's like, yeah, it's going to make $1 billion in its third weekend. So, yeah, it's sort of a juggernaut, pun completely intended. So, I don't know. What are your thoughts on the success of this thing before we get into House of the Dragon? This is a property that's based on Fox previously owned these characters' rights, and in the last 5, 6, 7 years, except for the Deadpool movies, they weren't, they weren't burning up the box office. But this movie with these two charismatic characters and stars, bringing back a lot of those Fox characters, is tearing it up at the box office. So I don't know. Do you think we're going to get any of these characters that were maybe just a cameo slash joke? You think they might get into actual like solo movies in the future? I don't know. It's making a ton of money.
I never thought about the Fox dynamic there. Um, I do think that plays a factor, especially with the little montage at the end, the little thing to pull at your heartstrings and stuff. I think a lot of people enjoyed that. Um, the nostalgia definitely played a factor into it, as well as the shock factor. But it's I think it really brought together the people who were hoping Marvel could still succeed, and the people who were like, yeah, I don't like Marvel, but I like Deadpool because he's edgy and he's not Marvel. So while it's a rated R movie about a very niche Marvel character, it still has a very broad audience. So I'm not entirely surprised by the success.
It's going to be interesting to see. D23 is not that far. It's just down the road just a little bit. I think it's next weekend. And I know that Marvel and Lucasfilm, and that's sort of like a Comic Con for Disney franchises and properties. So we'll see. I'm pretty sure Marvel held back some stuff from Comic Con so that they could make a splash at D23 as well. So I don't know if it's going to be too soon for them to have made any decisions on like these old Fox characters. The reason I thought of it was because I keep seeing like Ryan Reynolds and Marvel, and even, well, spoilers for Deadpool and Wolverine if you haven't seen it. No, no, I'm not gonna go down that road. So don't worry. No, 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 no spoilers. Um, because Marvel Studios is out there on social media like actively spoiling things now in the movie now that it's been out for 2 weeks. I guess all is fair, and they're just putting like people are posting pictures. So if you haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine by now and you haven't listened to our episode on it, go check it out. Because the one character I will specifically um, talk about, which has been in social media, has like been trending on Twitter for days now, is Gambit. Your favorite one, Luke. Ryan Reynolds was saying that he compared Channing Tatum's journey with Gambit to Ryan Reynolds' journey with Deadpool, because I guess Channing Tatum spent 10 years trying to develop a Gambit movie, and it never happened. It never got off the ground. And that's why the cameo is so funny, because he actually got to play Gambit. So Ryan Reynolds is sort of out there like, now he's sort of like, it seems like he's trying to create momentum, like talking up Channing Tatum, talking up Gambit, and it's almost like give the guy a chance to make this movie. So I don't know. I guess anything's possible, and there really isn't a Gambit in the MCU. So I don't know. Could you see Channing Tatum play Gambit in the MCU or get his own movie?
No, no. Um, yeah, no. Those are the extents of my thoughts. No.
You're satisfied with the cameo and you're ready to move on.
I think part of what made there be an appeal about Gambit is that he's a character that people like, and they made him something to talk about in the movie. I don't think anybody wants to watch an entire movie unless it's a comedy with Channing Tatum doing that character that way. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and talk about Channing Tatum's not a good actor or whatever, but he's a comedy actor, right? I don't know many serious movies he's been in, and I think most of
Sure.
his bigger ones are funny movies. And he was a funny character. He was an idiot. His voice was funny. He looked funny. Everything about him was funny. I don't know if people seriously want a movie like that, and if people say they do, I think it's sort of just like a, oh yeah, that was cool, that was funny, I want to see more of that. Not really like a, I want an entire franchise for this guy.
Yeah, I don't think that would be in play for any reason whatsoever. Because, you know, I mean, part of me wants to tell you that you're breaking people's hearts because people love that. There are huge Gambit fans out there, and I know you're not really a huge fan of the character, but
I'm not
there,
one of them.
yeah, you're not one of them. But there are people out there that love the character. I I would go watch it. I think the character is funky, but I don't know enough. I'm basing all of my opinion on, honestly, on the X-Men 97 animated series, which I don't think you have watched yet, which you should, because the character is just, he's really cool and it's unlike anything we've seen on film yet. But anyway, I think we've talked about Gambit enough. The movie is killing it still at the box office. We'll see what it does throughout the summer, but it's fun. Go check it out. And if we spoiled you about Gambit, I apologize. But I think by now the people listening to us talk know what they're getting when they listen to the podcast. So let's see. What else do I have for us? Oh, wait a minute. There's this thing called the House of the Dragon. We did not talk about episode 7 because we did talk about Deadpool Wolverine last week. So we're going to talk a little bit about both episodes 7 and 8 because there's a lot of cool stuff going on in 7. And I don't want to skip right to the end. I want to hear your thoughts on both of these episodes. I want to share with mine. And I also want to have a chance to sort of chit chat a little bit about the second season in general, where you're at with the second season, and then look forward a little bit. So that's where we're talking here about House of the Dragon. So spoilers for episode 7 and 8 of House of the Dragon season 2. If you haven't watched them, go check them out. Come back, listen to us talk about it. So let's go with season 2, episode 7, the Red Sowing. This is lots of stuff going on. I'm going to test your memory here because I know it's been a couple weeks since you probably watched it. I watched it again today just so I could have it fresh in my mind. But ironically, this episode is getting very high ratings, like audience ratings on IMDb. One of the highest rated episodes of the season. This is, of course, where it starts off with Rhaenyra and her dragon facing off with Alan and Sea Smoke, because at the end of episode 6, Sea Smoke claimed Alan instead of the other way around, right? So we have that really awesome scene where they're on the shore of a beach and they're just sort of like old West style, just staring each other down. Give me your overall thoughts the on the this episode, and then we can get into some more specifics.
I really liked episode 7. That was one of the only episodes of House of the Dragon that you and I have watched together, and I think
That's true. Yeah.
we both held similar reactions to that. Especially that first scene, it really set the tone for it. It was tense, and then it very quickly let you down easy and wrapped you up in a warm blanket, just for them to do the exact opposite later on. Um, I thought visually it was a excellent episode. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk more about it when we talk about season 2 as a whole, but it was mainly a dialogue show or season, and the dialogue has been great. The portrayal of the characters has been great, but there were some stunning visuals in episode 7, um, particularly in the Dragon Pit when we got to meet Vermithor, Sea Smoke, um, Silverwing. It was very. This episode did it, I think, better than any other episode in the season, where it gave you just enough to keep you interested, but without giving you what you wanted, right? Because I'm sure everybody wanted a little bit more, and they gave you just enough. And then, particularly with Rhaenyra, I thought Rhaenyra was at her best in this episode. She was, her typical conflicted self. She had all of her baggage on her, where she was questioning, is it what I'm doing right and all that. But ultimately, she went with her gut, and she was a force. There was a certain presence about her, particularly in this episode.
Especially when Jace came along and started to have some issues. And it wasn't like he had other issues in episode 8, but the issues started to. I found it sort of ironic because he was the one that sort of planted the seed of the dragon seeds, with like finding these maybe not pure Targaryen blooded people. But then when things really started to develop, he started developing hair issues. Like he just straight up started referencing his parentage, and he even said something to the effect of, did you think that my hair would be like this when you took Harwin Strong into your bed? And I'm like, you're getting pretty bold there, JC. Like, and the way that Rhaenyra handles it is just, I mean, she's my favorite character. I've said it before, and it's for reasons like this. Like, she has every reason. She has all the power in the world, in her world. If she wanted to go around cutting people's heads off, she would. If she wanted to smack Jace, no one would bat an eyelash if it were a king and the king smacked his kid for mouthing off. But Rhaenyra, she has been a picture of restraint through the whole season. Like, her whole character has been restraint. And she showed, just to sort of play off of your comments about her, she showed that in spades in episode 7. I referenced its audience rating or its audience score, and in on IMDb it's got a 9.0, and they have a scale from 1 to 10, right? Did you want to guess? There's one other episode that rated higher, like with an audience score, and it was a 9.5. Do you want to guess which episode that was?
Ooh, it was definitely in season one, right?
Oh, I'm just talking about just season two.
Oh, just season two? I don't know. It's all such a blur. Um,
It's a good point. I know I'm sort of taxing the memory here on this because there's so much has happened.
was it the decapitation episode?
That's pretty high. That was an 8.3, but this one is a 9.5. And think of the satisfaction that you felt when you started to see some serious action.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. The what was that little town that nobody cared about?
Oh yeah, the Red Rook or something, Red something or other.
Yeah, Rook's Rest. Yeah,
That's it.
I think that was the name of the episode, Rook's Rest. Um,
It should have been, and I commented on that. I don't know why they named this one the Red Dragon and the Gold, but it should have been called Rook's Rest. But whatever.
yeah, I
I just gave you your answer. It was episode 4, 9.5. That
that
was the
makes
one where Aemon burns Aegon, and we lose the queen that never was in a heroic act of dragonery.
that's a word.
It is now. Yeah. So anyway, so this one was second. The episode 7 was second to that. Ironically, we'll get to episode 8 here in a second, but um, we also see, interestingly enough, one of the reasons I think that this scored so high was because Christian Cole wasn't in it, and I just want to remind everybody that Christian Cole is the worst. He's the worst. I'm morally obligated to tell everybody that every episode. He's the worst.
Alicent is still the worst.
Speaking of Alicent, this is where she like basically goes to her guard and she's like, I want to go on a field trip. I feel the walls closing in around me on this. I got to get out of here.
And
And
I
I
hated her for that.
did you really? Why? Because I was really fascinated by it. That's a real big character moment for me.
That is such a like. That would be the equivalent of Taylor Swift being like, you know what? Inflation is really, really hurting my private jet. Let me go. Let me go fly to Wyoming so I can go to my ranch out there. Right? She feels the walls closing in because of her own actions. You know, she feels the people starting to turn on her. Well, the people are killing each other in the streets. They don't feel safe either,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, I mean, it makes sense. It's what any rational person would do. But because I already don't like her, and now she's, you know, almost nobody else in King's Landing has the ability to just say, yeah, let me just go take my private guard to go protect me with his life so I can go relax, right?
You make a very good point. She didn't make this decision because she feels like she's done something wrong or she wants to make things right. She's going on this sort of soul journey because she's got no more power, right? Because Aemond wants nothing to do with her on the small council. Otto is gone. No one knows what's going on with Otto. And she has no more, like her options have dried up, right? It's just her and Helena. And she can see, I think she's legitimately terrified of Aemond. And I think she probably wants to protect Helena. What's that?
100%. And also, Laris Strong is no longer on her side either.
Another option that has dried up because he's found something else or someone else that he can sort of suck power off of. So her options have all gone away. So she just goes off and needs to clear her head. But there is one thing. The one thing that I think was really captivating to me is when she went to go for her swim in the lake. When she was walking into that lake, just maybe the way it was framed, and she sort of looked ghostly, right? Because she's wearing her white gown, and there's like this mist going on. I mean, it's like a cloudy day and a mist on the lake. I was like, is she gonna drown herself? Because this is a Westeros story. This is a Game of Thrones story. And there weren't really, I mean, besides a child being beheaded, there weren't really any shocking deaths besides that and losing Rhaenys, which Rhaenys I don't even think was very shocking. She was just doing her duty and going in, taking care of a uh, a dangerous situation when she didn't want anybody else to go do it. But I was just like, "Oh my gosh, are you going to kill off Alicent in the seventh episode?" But they didn't. She just sort of looks up and sees this bird in the sky, and that's when she sort of gets reinvigorated. And I feel like she saw that bird and then saw freedom, saw the freedom that that bird has, and I feel like that became her motivation. Like she wants to get out of this whole place and just be done with all this dumb politicking and backbiting and just scheming and manipulation. If that's genuine or not, I don't know. But I felt like it was a pretty cool character moment in the moment that I was watching it.
Yeah, you're right. And it was I think a big thing too with that is she we end up seeing what she really feels in episode 8. I do agree with you. I think she sort of makes a decision in that moment when she sees that bird, and it everything becomes clear in that moment. I knew that she wasn't going to end her life right there because she's too evil of a character to just do something like that, right? The writers want us to suffer, so we weren't going to get lucky enough with a nice quick ending with her.
Boy, do they.
Um, Also, I think we see it a little bit more in episode 8 with how she starts talking to her children, and particularly how she talks to Helena. I think that experience where she got slapped by a fish, which thank you writers for that. Uh, I think that while it shocked her, I think it shocked Helena too, and I don't think that she wanted that. I think that was a I think that was equally important in her little spiritual journey, if that's what you want to call it.
Yeah, to experience that riot, which they sort of low key uh, showed us the after effects of what happened with the white cloaks that allowed that kind of thing. They got all shipped off to the wall. Um, I don't remember if that happened in the seventh episode of the eighth, but it did. Uh, things became really real. When you experience that, it becomes so much more than just words of somebody telling you, like, "Oh yeah, the small folk are upset." Okay, that's on your radar then, and you got to do something about it if you're in power. But it's not like you're in the middle of a riot and people are begging you for help and getting their arms chopped off because they're grabbing you because they're desperate. That makes a big impact. And I think that that is a similar impact on Alicent as the Rook's Rest battle had on Kristen Cole, because he was like literally suffering the PTSD of seeing his soldiers being turned to ashes because of a dragon. And that's I think that they had similar reactions, and we'll get to Kristen when we get to episode 8 because he has a moment. But the moment came earlier for Alicent when she went on that walk. Um, Speaking of moments, so I want to talk about Damon and his adventures in Harrenhal because they're starting to come to an end here. And in this episode is when young Oscar Tully comes to Damon and says, "Hey, we got to figure some stuff out because the River Lords are here." And I don't know, this wasn't as good as who I'm going to reference, but I was feeling some serious what was her name? Leanna Mormont.
Lyanna Mormont of Bear Island.
Yeah, Leanna Mormont vibes coming through young Oscar Tully because he controlled that
Oh
whole
yeah.
situation real nice, real nice. I mean, he
Shout
got
out
Damon
Lyanna
to do
Mormont.
something that Damon didn't want to do. So, what did you think about that whole scene?
I thought it was great. I think it was, I mean, in an episode with lots of highlights, that was definitely a highlight for me. Um, I was wondering while it was happening, when he sort of rolled over and let Damon do whatever he wanted, say whatever he wanted before the River Lords came, was it like was it all a ploy? Was he just pretending to be a little helpless boy, or was he actually like that? And now the pressure of being the I forgot what they called him, the Lord something of the Riverlands, if that now was taking an effect on him in a positive way. But I loved it. I mean, Damon had to swallow his pride because he very much knew that, if any sort of disrespect, it was going to lose him his army, which he paid a very hefty price for. He is never going to be the same after his little field trip to Harrenhal.
Oh no, he won't. Just wait till we get to episode 8. I like that idea that I hadn't thought about. Was Oscar Tully like hustling Damon with the whole doe-eyed youngster act earlier? That's a cool idea because he certainly was prepared and he was commanding and leading that whole thing. And you really, not that Damon's going to do whatever he wants to do, but it's sort of hard to argue with Tully's truth that he was talking about because he called Damon out on it. He's like, "Look, you told this guy to do something." And then he told that guy, I can't remember his name, so I don't have it in my notes, but he goes, "You didn't have to commit the crimes that you committed while doing what you were being told to do."
Willem
And
Black,
when
I believe.
Oh yeah, Willem Blackwood, yeah. So when Damon heard that, I would imagine like where Damon was at that point, he's like, "Well, I can't really argue with that. So you've got my you've got me in, like, you've checked me here, right?
Yeah,
If you're
checkmate, little
going to
man.
use a what's that?"
Checkmate, little man.
Exactly. He sort of strategized his way into getting Damon to fix that, and I thought it was real cool. Very very cool scene. Um, I don't want to forget to mention that this is also the episode that Reyna completely ditches everybody as they're riding off away from. Uh, I don't know what that place is called. You're the Game of Thrones
The
expert.
Veil.
Well, they're in the Vale, right? But is that what the castle
Erie.
and all that stuff is called?
The Erie, I
Oh,
believe, is the
great.
region, and the Vale, or no, I think the Vale is the region, and the Erie is like the castle.
Okay, that I thought so too. So you just confirmed that. So as the doors are closing there at the Erie, and the little caravan is going with the eggs and the babies, uh, Raina's just like, "See ya!" As soon as those doors closed, she just breaks hard right and starts running, and she's like, "I'm gonna find my dragon." And of course, we're gonna pick that up here when we get to episode 8. But I didn't want to forget to mention Raina because she's low key one of my favorite characters in this season.
Yeah, I think she's definitely the unsung hero of this season. She's done everything that has been asked of her and more, as well with her sister. What's her sister's name? Lena?
Bela. Bela
Babe.
is MVP status in my opinion.
Yeah, she's great. I think it's tricky because she doesn't get a lot of screen time, but every time she's on the screen, she's doing something important, and they're clearly planting the seed with her looking for sheep stealer. They're clearly planting the seed to get her a little bit more involved and in a bigger role, which I'm very happy about.
Me too. So we're gonna finish off our episode 7 discussion, of course, with the last part of the episode, which is them bringing all of these prospective dragon riders to Dragonstone. And I'm so glad I got to watch this sitting next to you because you got to see this in real time. Because at least in my social media circles, this became a real thing. And I needed a witness to testify that I said it before I saw any of those things on the internet. When Rhaenyra is walking around all of those prospective dragon riders trying to give her spiel and her speech, I got like hardcore Lord Farquaad vibes from Shrek, where she's like,
That was
"Some
the
of you
first
may
thing you said.
die." What?
That was the first thing you said.
I did, right? Okay. Thank you. Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make.
It was great. It was great.
When I hopped on Twitter after the fact, like I was just scrolling through, and sometimes I'll just check out the House of the Dragon hashtag, and like every third post was Farquaad up there on that perch saying that, like, some of you may die, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. I'm like, hey, I said that, and so thank you for testifying for me. So of course, Vermithor comes along. How sick was that shot though of her standing in front of Vermithor
So
once?
cool.
Oh,
So cool.
iconic. iconic, so good. So Vermithor
Can I add a
decides,
little? Can I add a little context to that?
yeah, yeah.
Vermithor is one of the greatest dragons in Westeros history, like just in sheer size and strength and ability. Um, I think he's the second, or no, he was the third largest dragon alive before. I think it was Vagar, and then Meleys, and um, and then Vermithor. His rider was Viserys, King Viserys, who never rode him because he had no need to. It was a very peaceful time, and Rhaenyra loved riding her dragon as a kid, and so she would always go visit Vermithor apparently, and they were very close because of that. Because Vermithor wanted to be ridden, but Viserys would never ride him, so she would go visit him. So they already had a very strong bond, not just because his previous rider was the father of Rhaenyra, but because she would go visit him as a child.
Oh, that's pretty cool. And that does add a lot of context to when she calls him and he comes out and then he's all sort of like agitated, but then there's just this moment between the two of them. And I thought about that. I'm like, well, she's the queen, of course. She's a dragon rider, of course. So I would imagine that dragons have a certain level of respect for any dragon rider just because they are a dragon rider.
Yeah,
But it seemed like they had more of a connection then like Rhaenyra has more of a connection with dragons. But now that I know it's sort of specific to Vermithor, that's really even cooler. That's awesome. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
of
So
course.
he did not have a connection with that poor sap that got put up there first. He made him into a crispy critter with about 12 other people. He's chomping, he's eating, there's chaos. Rhaenyra's face is just dropping because she's like, this is she had her hopes so high after Adam was claimed. I will not say that Adam claimed Sea Smoke because Sea
No,
Smoke claimed
he was
Adam.
claimed.
He was
100%.
claimed. So she had her hopes set high, and then things just start going really badly. But I thought that the way that to cut to the chase, Hugh claims Vermithor, and in another case of a dragon claiming a rider, I think um, Silverwing claims Ulf. And I thought that we could just talk about it in general. I like the way that the show did this because we've seen people claiming dragons before. And I thought that the way Hugh did it was very cool because he sort of matched Vermithor's energy. Like he screams at him, "Hey, I'm here!" It's sort of like aggressive, but not disrespectfully.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you or I said it, but we were talking about like why aren't they telling the rest of the people what they told the um whoever
Oh yeah,
the
Stefan Sparkling.
yeah, they were telling him like what to say in High Valyrian. They were saying like, show no fear, whatever. They did not offer that same advice to anybody else, but that's what Hugh did.
No, they didn't.
Hugh showed no fear. He was, you know, he it seemed like earned Vermithor's respect and it clearly worked. And then Ulf was in the complete opposite way, where he was just sort of like, "Don't eat me, please," and then ends up with a pet dragon.
Or did Silverwing end up with a pet human? Because that's the way that the dynamic there I think is more like that.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think it it was good to do it that way because you added three new dragons in three completely different new ways. You
Yeah, it's
had
true.
you had a dragon just up and leave Dragonstone and claim Adam. You had a dragon sort of earn somebody's respect, and then another one just by accident. And I think the only other example I can think of somebody claiming a dragon was Aemond claiming Vagar.
Yeah.
And that was weird. That one wasn't really like any of the other ones. It was probably the most traditional way of like, you go up to him and you sing to him and you're nice to him. But now we've seen four different dragons claimed in four different ways.
Yeah, it makes it very interesting and it makes it confusing too, but in a good way, because there's really it's still very mysterious how that dynamic works. And I'm down for it. So, and then of course the last scene of that episode I thought was just so satisfying because Aemond is sitting there with his small council, which is getting smaller by the minute because of things he's doing, and they're just sort of, blah blah blahing. Oh, and to sort of reference an earlier scene, one of his small council members goes to Laris and is just like, "Hey, you're the whispering guy. I got a whisper for you." And it was about sea smoke being claimed, and then Laris is like, "Well, let's look at the validity of this." And he's like, "Well, it was sort of like this person told this person told this person told this person who told me." And Laris just sort of like brushes it off. He's like, "Eh." But then when they start screaming dragon in that small council meeting and Aemon goes out that door, they cut to a shot of the two of them looking at each other. And they are fully expecting that to be sea smoke out there. But it's not. It's Silverwing with her pet human Ulf. And what does Aemon do? He jumps on a horse, jumps on Vagar, and goes off, and he's ready to go eat a dragon. But then that iconic shot of Rhaenyra with those three dragons on Dragonstone, and Aemon just turns heel and just books it. And I thought that was so satisfying.
Yeah, we're gonna see that shot in a lot of House of the Dragon posters and billboards and stuff like that.
No doubt. No doubt. So then let's get to episode 8, because it picks up pretty quickly with Aemond. And he goes because he's been embarrassed. He feels embarrassed. He's angry. And what is he going to do when he's angry? He takes it out on defenseless people because he's a monster. And I hate the fact that I dislike Kristen Cole and Allison more than I dislike Aemond, because I feel like Aemond should be the most disliked, but he's a very captivating character. And as much as I think he's a monster, I think he's an extremely good villain. So in a way that you like a villain, I like Aemond, but I am looking forward to seeing how he gets chomped on and what dragon gets the honor of taking him out. But he goes to some place called Sharp Point, which I had no idea what I was looking at, but I quickly realized I don't need to know. I just need to realize that he went and set a town on fire basically because he was angry. But they resolved my confusion here pretty quick. Um, so what was your response to Eamon's response to being embarrassed like that and then going off and just terrorizing a city?
You know, people had been sort of fearful of Aemond already. You know, there was that scene where Allison asks him, "Have the injustices of your childhood not yet been rectified?" or something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
Um, and they talk about him like he's a complete monster, but we haven't really seen him do super monster esque things yet. We've seen him do some pretty bad stuff, but nothing like that. Nothing where he's just killing thousands of innocent people in a fit of rage. Um, so I think this sort of showed the audience why the people in the show feel the way about that character, why they feel the way they do about him. And I think we're also a little bit desensitized to evil people in Game of Thrones because, as far as evil people go, in that we have seen in the Game of Thrones verse, Aemond might not crack the top five.
It's a very good point. There are some truly despicable characters in this world, and he does despicable things, but I don't. But he's sort of a sympathetic character because of he's doing things out of childhood trauma. Like all these things that he does are rooted in childhood trauma, right? So, in my mind, at least, it makes somewhat of a sympathetic character. But you know what? Let's back up before we get into the details. I want to. This is your chance. I want to hear. I'm very interested because we haven't talked about this at all. What was your overall thoughts and about this episode specifically, not just as an episode but as the season finale? Because there's already some dialogue going on about this episode. So where do you fall? What are your thoughts on the episode themselves?
Um, Specifically for 8 or 7 and 8?
8, just 8.
Just 8. Honestly, a little disappointed. Not in. It was good for what they were trying to do. I just disagree with what they were trying to do, which is stupid of me because that's me trying to, like you say, drive the roller coaster.
Yeah.
But you know, I want to go back to what you mentioned about the highest rated episode. That episode was rated the highest because it showed us what we've wanted to see: dragons fighting dragons in the most epic way. The only other time we've seen dragons fight dragons is if you watched Game of Thrones, and you get to see a dragon fight a dragon for a little bit. But other than that, what have we seen? We've seen Vagar eat Lucerys and his dragon, but that's it, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I think everybody was waiting for the big season finale, big fight at Harrenhal, all that stuff. I think we are headed for Harrenhal, but I do wish that we would have progressed a little bit more in the show. I don't know if this is confirmed or not, but I saw that something in Vanity Fair was talking about how there's going to be 4 or 5 seasons of House of the Dragons, and then that's going to be it. Um, if that's the case, there's still plenty of time to tell stories, but I would like to be a little bit deeper into a civil war when the show is about a civil war and you're 2 seasons in, potentially halfway through.
Well, I may have some good news then for you because I I think I sort of reacted the way you did, and of course, I know that we have different approaches because as we were watching episode 7 together, I kept on saying I wonder how much time is left, and you had the control and you said I try never to I try never to look, and I was like, okay, let me try that out because that could be fun. So, but I
I only
broke
do
that
that for
rule.
shows I really enjoy.
Yeah, because you don't want to know like, oh, this is going to be over in 5 minutes, so that you can sort of tell like what's going to happen if by the runtime, right?
Yeah,
So I did that with this episode, and it was about halfway through. No, it was even less. It was like only 30 minutes into it. So I'm like, oh, I've got a good chunk left. But then I did it again near the end, and I saw there was about 15 minutes left, and that's when I realized like, okay, so we're not going to be getting a major battle because there's no way they're going to start a battle and with like 10 minutes left in the show. So I sort of prepared my brain for that, like, okay, this is going to end somehow, but it's not going to end with a huge battle like everybody sort of expects a season finale to have. And I think it's a bold decision. I'm okay with it. And again, I'm the guy that likes to watch interesting characters standing around in rooms talking. But I respect it. I think that they had an idea for what they were trying to do, and they went with it. Time will tell if it's the right decision or not, but I'm okay with it.
yeah, yeah. I can agree with that. Um, I think one of the more frustrating things for me is that they found tremendous success clearly in episode, what was that, 4 at Rook's
Yeah,
Rest,
yeah,
and you don't want to just keep going back to the well over and over because then it's going to get stale, and it's also extremely expensive to animate dragons with CGI and all that stuff. So
sure,
I
sure.
get it. Um, but I think now there's no excuse. You have to have an action-packed rest of the show. You can have a couple episodes here and there where they might be a little bit slower, but I don't know how you can justify spending an entire season. I mean, the first scene of the show ends up with the Starks marching south, right?
Hmm.
The final scene of the end of the season is the Starks marching south, right? That
Yeah. Well, they are graybeards, so they may march a little slower than other
and those
armies.
beards, gray they were. Um, and I don't necessarily have an issue with that. I just think it now makes some of the other episodes feel a little bit less important, right? A couple episodes felt I'm not going to call them filler episodes because they did move the plot a little bit more so in the sense that it gave context to why characters are the way they are, why they're doing what they're doing. Um, but we really got an entire season of Damon having an existential crisis in Harrenhal. And I do think we should talk a little bit about his vision in Harrenhal.
Oh,
Um,
we're getting there. We will.
but I think you could have done a little bit different. Could have done it a little bit faster. Maybe just one more big big thing, because what what is the one thing that people are going to be talking about in this show now? It was, or in this season, really the only big thing was um, the fight at Rook's Rest. That's it. The entire season can be summarized in one episode of talking and one episode of fighting. And this show is better than that, in my opinion. But I think, unfortunately, that's what the narrative is going to be.
And I think that that's I don't think that's a correct narrative. And I want to share with you a quote that, you know how I love watching that inside the episode thing that they put at the end, and I love to poach quotes and stuff. It just sort of lets us get inside the actors and the producers, directors, writers' heads, and I love to do that. I love to see their perspective on things. But Ryan Condal is in charge of this show. Like, if you watch the credits, it says that this show was created by Ryan Condal and George R. R. Martin. So you never see George R. R. Martin talking on this inside the episode thing, but you will always see Ryan Condal talking. And the quote that I sort of pulled out of this, and I was going to save it for the last part of our chat, but I want to insert it now because the context is key. He basically, and to paraphrase him, he says this season was about exploring like the details of a medieval civil of the start of a medieval civil war. So like he made a point to talk about how they wanted to explore the details. He said season 3 is about total war. And those are the words he used, total war, and he took that into season 3. So I know a lot of people, when we saw the end of season 1, I know a lot of the reaction was, yes, season 2 is going to be the dance of the dragons, meaning the war has begun. But no, this wasn't the war. Really, they keep talking about this war, this war, this war. There's only been a few battles. It's a war because there's conflict between these two houses, but there hasn't been very much bloodshed in the sense of uh, a battlefield and dragons out there. We just got that in Brook's Rest. But I think that the based on Ryan Condal's comments, season 3 is going to be much more about the dance of the dragon. So who knows if we get 8 episodes, 10 episodes, 6 episodes? Because like you said, it's very expensive to produce these things. If it's going to be a lot of these battles, more battles than some of the battles we thought we were going to get, but we'll probably get in season 3 now, then I personally think it makes the first two seasons even better in my opinion, because as a whole you get to see. I think that this season 2 will make those battles have even higher stakes because of the
I
time they've been developing things.
I agree with you because part of what made Game of Thrones so great was the episodes that nobody goes back and rewatches or talks about. But it set a strong foundation. So then when big things did happen, it meant that much more. So I do agree with you on that. However, I think when you have as much hype as you have around this show, I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think most people who watched Game of Thrones are watching this show, and I think a lot of people were really excited for this show.
Yeah.
So I do think it's going to lose a little bit of steam. Part of it will be just people saying, "I didn't get what I want. Poor me," right? Um, and but those people come and go. I do think that there will be a group of people who are going to say, "Let me watch when talk to me when we see some dragons fighting," because I already spent 2 months waiting for dragon fighting, got one fight, right? And I think
I
that's
think I think that's a very very important point, and I agree with you 100%. And I think that the decision that they made to tell the story this way is very bold, because you're taking that chance. You're going to have the people like me that like to watch people standing in rooms talking. I'm going to watch week by week next week, but you will have people being like, look, I've watched 2 seasons of talking, so I'm going to wait till this is all available to me, and I'll see if I watch it because based on what other people have said that are watching it, because I want to see some action and some battles. And I think that's fair. I don't think that, that we have two different types of viewers now. We've got the week to week ones and we've got the bingers.
Yeah,
And that's the chance that they're taking by telling the story this way. So
I think my last point about this will be, I think that it's now you've set the bar very high because it's your story. Tell it how you want. Don't bend the knee to the audience, right? Don't fan service is the worst thing you can do. Um, but now you, I think the stakes are very high, and clearly the people making the show know how to make a show. So I'm confident that they're going to do well and do right by whatever they do going forward. But the bar is very high now, and if you don't reach it, I don't think you can blame anybody but yourself.
yeah, and that's the ramifications of making decisions, right? And you just don't know. You make decisions based on the information you have and the story you want to tell, and it works or it doesn't. And that's sort of the reality of it, right? Um, since this sort of turned into, and we're going to get to details of the episode 8 because there's some big ones, and you brought up Damon's vision, and that I want to talk about that. But just to sort of cap off like the way that this discussion went, which is sort of like an overall season discussion, Ryan Condal also said in an Entertainment Weekly article that there will be 4 seasons, that in the way that he has it in his mind, it will end after the fourth season. So that's confirmed by him. So if it could change, who knows? But it is from his mouth, and that they'll start filming. He said, "quote unquote" early-ish 2025. And I sort of looked into the time frame of season 2. They took just over 5 months to film season 2. They were done filming season 2 in September, and then the show premiered in June. So is it June? Yeah, it was June, right? So if they're going to spend 5 6 months filming this beginning early-ish 2025, then we'll probably end up seeing uh, a season 3 potentially in the first quarter of 2026. So about a year and a half or so from now. So, it is a long time to wait, and that's sort of a bummer because we all want to see what comes next. But we have a lot of things to keep ourselves occupied between now and then. So anyway, that's sort of some of the stuff that going forward. But you mentioned, so let's go backwards now. You mentioned Damon's vision in Harrenhal. I'm going to tell you, because I know that my comments are not going to sway what you have to say, but for me, the vision in Harrenhal and then the subsequent scene of him and Rhaenyra when she comes to Harrenhal made the whole season spent with Damon there worth it for me, because that scene with him and Rhaenyra, I'm not lying, it gave me chills. I thought that scene was so brilliant and so powerful. It gave me chills, and that scene wouldn't have happened had he not had that vision before. So let's talk about that whole thing. I know you got stuff to say about his vision, so hit me with it. How did that work for you? What did you think?
All right, let me lock in for a second here. I gotta put on my shades. Got my
Nice.
got
Are
my
those like San Diego Padre shades?
no, they're from Target. So you see a lot of different things in Damon's vision, and I will agree with you. The build up to that helped make the payoff stronger. I want to mention the guy who came in and was like, "What this realm needs is a king," and whatever. And then you heard the little whisper while they were in the God's Wood saying "traitor." Oh, I
That was so sick. That was so
love
sick.
that. I'm so glad Rhaenyra slapped that guy. I hope she slaps him again. Um, but obviously, you see Daenerys, which to me that shows that she was the prince slash princess who was promised, um, to bring an end to the long night and whatever. Um, Another thing was you see the White Walkers, which awesome, love that. clearly scared Damon straight. But then you see a guy sitting in the you see the little three-eyed raven, right? Then you see the a guy sitting in the tree, and I think it was supposed to be implied that that was the three-eyed raven that we see in Game of Thrones Beyond the Wall. Now, I found a little thing breaking down who that person was because they made that person clearly look like a Targaryen, and he had a red birthmark on his cheek. Apparently, his name is Brendan Rivers, and he is supposed to be a character from the books. He was a Targaryen bastard, and he was a Blackwood as well, so he's from the Riverlands. He served as Hand of the King. He put down some rebellions or whatever, and then afterward the king didn't like him, so he banished him north of the wall. And once he left north of the wall, he then became or he joined the Night's Watch. Then he left. No one ever saw him again, but he becomes the three-eyed raven that we see, and stuff like that. I love that kind of stuff. It just scratches a certain itch for me, right? Because it adds context to everything else, not just in this season and the seasons going forward, but to a completely different show. And that's so big to me.
Yeah, I saw a lot of that sort of discussion about that vision. Um, so much. There's so much that we could get into with that vision, and I'm gonna take the approach of I'm gonna wait and see. I thought it was super cool seeing Daenerys with the dragons. I thought that was very well done. I was sort of confused by everything else, but I did see a lot of things online about things that you just said about the three-eyed raven. So all of that super cool. I'm really more interested at this point into as to what it did to Damon. And you mentioned it, like it scared him straight. And I loved how when he went to go talk to Rhaenyra and they're speaking in High Valyrian, she sort of says, "You sound like my father." So, like the entrance into the world of the supernatural for Damon sort of harkened back to Viserys, which I thought was just super cool. And then the deference he gave to Rhaenyra and the rallying of that army toward for her, I was like, Damon, you're a psychopath. This is why I love you. I don't know if I trust you yet, but I am eating this up right now. So I just all of it worked so much for me. Um, Another thing that worked for me was the scene between Corlys and Alan, and it was all because of the performance that we got from the actor who plays Alan. His delivery of that monologue, again, I think I referenced this before of like Andor level, right? With the character whose name I forgot again, uh, giving the monologue outside the elevator. But the emotion in that man's face and in his speech about grief and hunger, what hunger does, and seeing Corlys with his son going out and picking up sweet meats. Oh God, it was. I'm a super fan for Alan now. I don't know what the future holds for him, but I hope that he's in this series a lot more going forward because I think he's really captivating.
Yeah, I remember saying earlier, a couple episodes ago, that I can't wait to see him riding a dragon. Now I'm completely on the opposite side. Like, no, don't get this guy anywhere near a dragon. Let him do his own thing because he snapped once and it scared me. Do not give him a high-powered weapon.
Yeah, exactly. Then we so much, man, so much in this episode. We could go in so many different directions, but we could go with like Laris approaching Aegon and being like, "Hey, I'm reading the tea leaves here. I'm hearing the whispers. Let's get out of town. I've got a lot of money saved up and in an Airbnb and who knows where. Let's go hang out for a while until things cool down, and let the monsters burn each other up, and then we'll come in. And that's when Aegon does his whole like, oh, what does Larys say? Something about the Aegon the Rebuilder, Aegon the Peacemaker, and then Aegon just absolutely loves his nickname he gave himself, Aegon the Realm's Delight, and that's what sells him on going and running. Is anything you wanted to mention about that about that scene?
Yeah, that's hashtag that's so Aemond. He's or Aegon. So Aegon. That's my first time messing up a name today. I was thinking earlier, wow, I it took me 2 seasons, but I finally know people's names.
I felt the
Um,
same way. Like I was like, I think I'm in a pretty good place with names now.
yeah, I know him now. I thought that was cool. I thought it was whatever. It was very him, so it's fitting. But one person I'd like to talk about just for a second is Helena.
Oh, I'm glad. Yeah, go for it.
My girl Helena. She did not want to ride Dreamfire to battle, even though apparently Dreamfire is a very formidable opponent, according to Rhaenyra. Um, she spoke coherently for the first time in the entire show, and it scared me straight to my bones. Um, she, I think she put Damon in a really weird spot because now,
Oh, that's strike two. You called Eamon Damon.
damn, Aemond in a weird spot. I think now that he realizes he's outnumbered, he's going to be one of two dragons riding into battle because we see the other dragon later on. It's going to put him in a really desperate spot, and a desperate Damon Aemond is a dangerous Aemond.
You know what I found so interesting about that scene was that what scares Eamon the most is the truth, because Helena knows about what he did to Aegon, and there's no way that he can deny that because he knows the truth of what he did to Aegon, and somehow to him he doesn't know how, but she knows how. She knows that this happened, and that scares him. And then she doubles down on it and is just like, Aegon's going to be king again. He hasn't won his victory, and you're going to die. And he's just like, well, what if I kill you? And she's like, it's not going to change anything. And you can I mean, talk about, that is power. She has such power over Aemon in those words. It's ridiculous. um but I can't end this episode without us talking about Rhaenyra and Alicent, because now Alicent has crossed the bay and is now knocking on Rhaenyra's door. What did you think about that scene in general, and basically what Alicent's trying to say to Rhaenyra?
I loved it. I loved it because Rhaenyra was like, no, no, you already. I offered you your olive branch, you denied it. Now you're desperate. No, go away. Right at the beginning, she didn't meet her with any sort of kindness or even open mindedness. She wanted nothing to do with what Allison was saying. And then by the end of it, she was finally open to it. But it wasn't even in the sense that she was trusting Allison. It was more like, okay, Allison, go do your thing. And if you're right, then I win. And if you're wrong, then I just go back to my normal plan. And I thought that was it was cool to see Rhaenyra's restraint paying off, because if she would have listened to everybody else through the entire season, there would have already been a ton of bloodshed, and this never would have been an option. I still don't think that this is going to be an option because, you know, it's too good to be true. But um, I'm glad that Rhaenyra finally understood. She was right. Her being patient and her following her game plan worked. It paid off, at least up until this point.
Yeah, so far. Well, and it's not going to work because the whole plan hinges on a son for a son, right? And the way I thought of it was like, Allison's going to find a way to get Aegon's head, because bending the knee is not enough, so it has to involve Aegon's death. Well, Aegon's gone, so like he took off with Laris. We see that in the little compilation at the end. So it's that plan already is not going to work. But I like the point that you brought up, that if it doesn't work, then Rhaenyra just goes back to the plan that she had because she already has them outnumbered with dragons. She has an army that can match their army at least. Um, I don't know if it's bigger in number or whatever, but it's better. It's more than what they had before. We'll see what happens out there with the Sea Snake and the Triarchy. Oh, which is another point that we should probably get to. It was I thought it was fun seeing the whole Lannister over in the Triarchy thing. It felt very Game of Thronesy to me with Tywin Lannister or Tyland. I messed up his name like the lady with the admiral was. I thought that was a lot of fun. That sort of harkened back to some fun Game of Thrones moments. How did all that work for you? I know we're taking a little detour from the Alicent Rhaenyra thing, but it involves that. So how did you like it?
I loved it. I loved it. It felt like I was getting the revenge I wanted on all the other terrible Lannisters in Game of Thrones. Like they were putting all of that punishment that they deserved onto their ancestor, and I'm all for it. He was
Yeah,
getting beat up, he was getting humiliated.
he had to sing in front of everyone.
He wasn't like when I think of the Lannisters from Game of Thrones, Tyrion is probably the smartest character in the show. Cersei is one of the smartest and definitely the most diabolical. Jamie was one of the greatest swordsmen in the world and becomes a very interesting character. Tywin, again, just a master manipulator, always right. And then you have Tyland, who's kind of an idiot. Like even when he wasn't in that context of being humiliated for the purpose of getting an armada, he was always sort of an idiot, and I loved it. It was funny. It added a little bit of the humor that I think season one and season two don't have that Game of Thrones have, because it was funny. It was lighthearted. It was low stakes. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I echo everything you said, especially the part about the humor and the levity that the show doesn't necessarily have. So I don't know if we're going to get any more. I think, well, we're going to have more of those characters, but maybe not in that setting. I'm looking forward to that. But to circle back with Rhaenyra and Alicent, I guess my final thought on that confrontation or that conversation, I really honestly felt like I was watching them speaking. I like flashed back to the early parts of season one where they were friends, where they were confidants. Even though it was two completely different actresses, and from the two actresses we were watching in this episode, I just saw all that history, and it wasn't like a former queen speaking to the queen. It wasn't. It wasn't like Rhaenyra's dad's wife talking to Alicent's husband's daughter. It was just Rhaenyra and Alicent, if that makes any sense. I really, and I agree with the way that Rhaenyra played it. Like she asked her twice, like, "Why are you here?" So I don't know if Alicent is still conniving. I don't know if Laris is conniving. I don't even know if I trust Missaria, but that's one of the reasons why I like this show is it keeps you on your toes with characters like that. And it's sort of how I felt with like Littlefinger through the entire series of Game of Thrones. Like he serves such a purpose, and then sometimes he's helping the characters you want him to help, but then other times he's just backstabbing people. I feel like there's so many of these characters in this show, and it makes it very compelling to me. So I've enjoyed the first two seasons. I thought this was an excellent episode of TV. As a finale, it's a massive cliffhanger. It sort of feels like it would be nice to have two more episodes like we had the first season, but I'm willing to wait. I'm willing to get the payoff in spades, maybe next season in season three. So uh come on 2026, get here with some House of the Dragon. Did you have any final thoughts, anything you wanted to share about this episode or this or the show in general?
Two things. One, that purple dragon is cool.
So that was Darren's, right?
Yeah, that was Darren's dragon. Don't know his name, but he's cool.
He's
Or
purple.
she. We don't know. Um, Two, not enough major characters died in this season, So I'm sure season 3 will compensate.
Well, we know everybody dies. I mean,
That is true.
it's just of old age. We know everybody's gonna die, and if it's true that there's only going to be 4 seasons, which the fourth season hasn't been officially even picked up or announced yet, but we do know that Ryan Condal says at least the story he has is going to be through 4 seasons. Then yeah, there's going to be a lot of carnage in the next couple seasons. So um, I'm a big fan. I really enjoyed watching this season through the context of actually having watched Game of Thrones because I would not have known. I would have been so confused by Damon's vision, but because I watched Game of Thrones, the last year or whenever it was I watched it, uh, that was just super satisfying for me. And then I feel like I'm learning more and more about like the geography of all this. This season had more scope. So anyhow, we'd love to know what you guys think about it. So let us know on X or Threads or Instagram what you guys thought about House of the Dragon season 2. And Luke, was that it? Did you have anything else?
That's it from me.
Okay, super duper. Me too. So thank you all for listening. Thanks for supporting the show and checking us out week after week as we give you guys these episodes to hopefully have fun with. You can find us on X and on Threads and on Instagram. I've been putting up some movie quotes and or TV show quotes. Hope everybody is enjoying that. I do it as long as I can remember, but I hope that you guys are all enjoying them because some of the I really enjoy movie quotes and TV quotes. So sharing them with all of you is fun too. So thanks again for listening. We really appreciate it. We hope everybody's having a great August out there and enjoying all of your pop culture TV shows and movies. So for Luke, this is Colby reminding you to be careful when cooking your sausage on a spit. You can find the Colby Cast on Twitter and Instagram at the Colby Cast. If you're wordy, like me, you can send an email to thecolbycast@gmail.com. Please subscribe to the show and leave a review on your favorite podcast app or wherever you listen to podcasts. This podcast is not endorsed by anyone or anything for that matter. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of the Colby Cast unless otherwise indicated.
That'll do, Donkey. That'll do.